The wait list to receive an autism evaluation are getting longer every day, but there are some things you can do to get some insight on where your child or client stand while you're waiting in line. Hi, I'm Dr. Mary Barbera, autism mom, board-certified behavior analyst, online course creator, and best-selling author of The Verbal Behavior Approach. Each week, I provide you with some of my ideas about turning autism around. So if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, you can do that now. Today, I'm sharing a small excerpt from a podcast episode I did with developmental pediatrician Dr. James Coplan, who was the developmental pediatrician who diagnosed Lucas in 1999. In this excerpt, Dr. Coplan is discussing his early language milestones development scale. If you want to check out the full podcast episode, you can go to marybarbera.com/35 or click on the card on the screen. The early language milestone scale, you had told me before we started recording, was published in 1980 and is still available at ProEd, and we'll link that in the show notes. But you were explaining how, which I think is really good, this scale was basically to see if a child had just a speech delay, one part of a speech impairment, or a more global language issue like kids on the spectrum have. And it's a screening tool for kids up to the age of 3. Can you describe just briefly the 3 types of skills that early language milestone scale is looking at?
Sure. So the scale, and I don't have a copy in front of me, but it's a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper that's divided horizontally into 3 areas. The first area has to do with auditory expressive language skills, and those start with things like cooing, babbling, making single syllables, making multiple syllables, then jargoning, which is rising and falling syllables that are like speech, and then mama or dada, whether specific or not, and then moving on to single words, 2-word phrases, and then what I call Cookie Monster speech, me want cookie, kind of 3 to 5 word phrases with broken English, leaving out the verb to be in conjunctions. And that takes you from birth to about 36 months in the expressive area. For auditory receptive, which is the middle area of the page, the middle horizontal bar, it starts with things like alerting to sound, turning to a bell or something else like that, and then following parents' commands, initially with a gesture on the part of the parent, like give me with the parent's hand out, and then give me without the parent's hand out like that, and then following 2-step commands and then more complex commands. So again, that takes us from birth to about 5. The auditory expressive area takes us from the auditory receptive area takes us from things like turning to sound all the way up to following 2 to 3-step commands. Now, the third area, and I'm particularly pleased with this, that I included, is visual communication skills. And those are not often present on a language screening tool because most language tools are inherited from speech-language pathologists who are about speech and receptive language. But visual is just as important. So it starts with things like eye contact, and then it moves on to things like playing gesture games like patty cake and peekaboo. It's so big, it should come in around 7 to 9 months old, imitating gestures. As I said earlier, if you give a visual cue along with a verbal command, give it to me with your hand out, that's at a 9-month level. Give it to me without your hand out is at a 12-month level. And then it gets to things like pointing. And it turns out that the age at which children use index finger pointing to point to a desired object is virtually identical to the age at which children will use single words to name the object that they want. This is based upon histories taken from parents where my research assistants would ask, does your child do this? Does your child do that? And then we looked at how the data lined up, and index finger pointing lined up virtually identically to within a couple of weeks of the use of a first single word. So delayed pointing is one of those indices of language development, even in a child who may have, quote, normal, unquote, length of utterance if they're echolalic for phrases.
Yeah, and I think because I've been trained in the STAT, which is a screening tool for autism in 2-year-olds, and the ADOS, and the MCHAT, and things like that. Like, I do a fair amount of looking at pointing and talking about pointing, and that is one of the big red flags for autism is lack of pointing, which in typical kids comes in fast and furious very early on, and with kids with autism, it's almost always delayed. I hope you enjoyed this short snippet from the podcast. If you want more content, check out the podcast at marybarbera.com/podcast. Wherever you're watching this, I'd love it if you would leave me a comment, give me a thumbs up, share this video with others who may benefit. And for more information, you can attend a free online workshop at marybarbera.com/workshop. And I'll see you right here next week.